Hey guys, today I'll be taking a look at the 2022 Senate map based on the betting odds. The Democratic Party has increased their chances significantly in many of the most competitive races, the races that they really need to win in states like Arizona and Georgia. The Democrats' numbers have increased a lot over the last couple of weeks, and this is increasing their overall chances at winning the Senate. And if you look at this map here, I already filled in a lot of these solid states for either party. That's because these races really are not going to be competitive at all, and the betting markets either don't exist for these states or they show either party with a 98-99% chance of winning. So looking at the 11 competitive races, the betting odds can be a very good indicator as to how these states will vote this November. For example, if you look at a state like Florida, the GOP has a 93% chance of winning this race, and this is because people put their money where they think they will win, not on the candidates that they truly support. And so that's what makes the betting odds very good at indicating whether or not these races are going to be close, how most of the public perceives these races, and of course they can be a very good predictor as to the overall outcome. So looking at the state of Florida, I mean, obviously very solid for the GOP, even though elections in Florida are typically almost always very close. And so this really is a good indicator as to the fact that the Democratic Party really does not stand too much of a chance in the state of Florida. So today we'll be taking a look at the 2022 Senate map based on the betting markets, and I'm going to start off with the most solid state for the GOP. Obviously, Florida is going to be very solid. If you look at the race here, Marco Rubio is running for a third term against Val Demings. Val Demings is going to win the Democratic primary, but if you look at the polling between the two, Val Demings is only at 40%. Marco Rubio has a 9-point lead on average in the polls released in the state of Florida, and this is bad news for the Democratic Party, and the betting odds clearly show this. They have absolutely no chance of winning this race. If you look at previous elections in Florida, I mean in 2016, Marco Rubio won a second term by 8 percentage points, and in 2018, Rick Scott defeated Bill Nelson, the Democratic incumbent, since the 1990s. So Rick Scott was able to flip Florida in 2018. This was really the only major loss for the Democrats. If you look at the races in North Dakota, Missouri, and Indiana, all three of these races were pretty much going to go to the Republicans since the start, just because of how much these states had shifted to the right over the last couple of years. So the state of Florida obviously is going to be very solid for the GOP. Moving on to the state of Missouri, another state in which the Republicans have a significant chance of winning. In 2016 here, Roy Blunt ran for re-election, barely defeated Jason Kander, and he will not be running for a third term in 2022. So that means that there will be both a primary on the GOP and Democratic side. However, both primaries really are a big mess at this point in time. If you look at the Missouri primary on the Republican side, Eric Greens and Eric Schmidt are the two frontrunners, and both of these individuals have a very good chance at winning the nomination, and the polling numbers really do show that this is a very close race. Eric Greens is, of course, the former governor that resigned in 2016 as a result of a sexual misconduct scandal, and his own party turned on him, and he is not a good nominee in a statewide race. In terms of his own party, though, he does have enough support within the GOP in Missouri to win his nomination, but winning the race statewide is going to be more difficult for Eric Greens than any of these other potential nominees. While on the Democratic side, it's a close race between Trudy Valentine and Lucas Kunce. Really, we're just going to have to see what happens over the next couple of months here in the state of Missouri. But if you look at the hypothetical polling between the potential nominees, Eric Greens only leads over Lucas Kunce by 3.5%, while Eric Schmidt leads over Lucas Kunce by 13.5%. So this really just goes to show you how competitive Missouri may be if Eric Greens is nominated. But as of this point in time, the GOP still has an 88% chance of winning in the state of Missouri. That's 88 cents per share in the state of Missouri for the GOP to 12 for the Democrats. So obviously Missouri is going to be very solid for the Republicans as well. And as for these margins, solid is going to be anything from 85 to 100 cents per share. 70 to 85 is likely. 55 to 70 cents per share is lean, while anything from 50 to 55 is going to be tilt. So after those two very solid Republican states, we have just one more solid state on this map, and that is the state of Ohio. In the state of Ohio, J.D. Vance is running to succeed Rob Portman, the Republican incumbent, who will no longer be running for another term. Tim Ryan is, of course, the Democratic nominee, and I think that he is by far the best nominee that the Democratic Party could have chosen in the state of Ohio, and I think that he can make this race very competitive. If you look at the polling numbers, Tim Ryan has actually led in more recent polls than J.D. Vance. If you look at the 3 polls released this year, Tim Ryan led in 2 out of the 3 polls. However, the 2 that he did lead in were Democratic funded, so really that does show you that Tim Ryan is not doing that well in this state. J.D. Vance does lead by 3 points in the only independent poll released anytime recently, but I do think that Tim Ryan can make this race relatively competitive. However, if you look at the betting odds, I mean, still, the GOP has an 86% chance of winning. So even though this race can get competitive, the Democratic Party realistically does not stand too much of a chance. Yes, they do have a Democratic senator in Ohio, being Sherrod Brown. However, he has a very long history in the state, and he won his re-election in 2018 by 7% against Jim Renacci, but that does not mean that Tim Ryan is going to win in 2022 because a Democrat was elected in Ohio 4 years ago. If you look at the 2016 race, I mean, it was solid for Rob Portman, 21% margin. I don't think voters in Ohio are going to vote for Tim Ryan like they did for Sherrod Brown. The 2 candidates are just not the same. Sherrod Brown is like Joe Manchin, but in the state of Ohio, a Democrat in a pretty much Republican state at this point in time, although West Virginia is a lot more Republican than Ohio. And Donald Trump won Ohio by 8% against Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, which really goes to show you just the state of Ohio did not shift anywhere to the left over the last couple of years. So in the state of Ohio, it will be solid for the GOP as well. Another state that may be competitive, but the GOP still has an overwhelming chance of winning. Now, moving on to the likely states, we have the first state here for the Democrats, and that is the state of Colorado. And in the Colorado Senate race, Michael Bennet is running for a 3rd term. I think that he is a pretty mediocre nominee on the Democratic side. He will be a 3-term senator, but his margins have not been the strongest in the state of Colorado. If you look at the polling numbers between him and Joe Dia is currently poised to be the GOP nominee. Michael Bennet does do very well in the polls, but that's because these Republican nominees, the potential ones, really are not well known across the state. And if you look at the betting odds, the Democrats have an 84% chance of winning in the end with Michael Bennet, 84 to 18. The Democratic Party is pretty much not going to lose Colorado no matter what, but this race really still can get pretty competitive because of the fact that Michael Bennet is not known for winning by the largest of margins, and of course it is 2022, a year that the Republican Party is doing very well. And if you look at the generic congressional ballot polling right now, the Republicans continue to lead by around 2%. So in the state of Colorado, I do have it as being likely for the Democrats. Obviously, a state that they're going to win, but just a little bit less likely in terms of the actual percentage chance of winning. If you look at the previous Senate elections in this state in 2020, John Hickenlooper defeated incumbent Cory Gardner by 9.3%, but in 2016, Michael Bennet only won his re-election by 5.7%. So really, I do believe that Michael Bennet is the weaker of the 2 senators, and that's why his race is just going to be a little bit closer. Now, moving on east to the state of North Carolina, this is a big state for the GOP. They cannot lose North Carolina. If you look at the North Carolina race here, Ted Budd against Sherry Beasley. Budd is running to replace Richard Burr, who will no longer be running in the Senate. He will be retiring after this term. The candidates have already been chosen on both sides, and if you look at the polling between the two, I mean, clearly Ted Budd has an advantage in this race. Sherry Beasley has only led in 1 out of all the polls that have been released. Ted Budd leads by 4% on Real Clear Politics, 2.4 on 538, an average of 3.1 percentage points. But if you look at the betting odds, he has an 84% chance of winning. A lead of 3.1% on average translates here to an 84% chance of winning, and I think that is relatively accurate. I mean, they have overestimated the Democrats here in many of the previous elections. Joe Biden was expected to win North Carolina in 2020, but he ended up losing it. He did win Georgia, though, so really none of the polls predicted that Georgia would actually go to the Democrats, but not North Carolina. And the Senate race in North Carolina as well, Cal Cunningham in 2020 led in almost all of the polls leading up to the election against Tom Tillis, but Tom Tillis still won his re-election against Cal Cunningham. So that really just goes to show you that the polls in North Carolina are not great. If you look at the 2016 race, it was a pretty solid race for Richard Burr, even though polls suggested that he would only barely win his re-election. So North Carolina, it will obviously remain in the Republican column, and according to the betting odds here, I currently have it as a likely state. And now that we have all of the solid and likely states out of the way, we can now move on to the 6 competitive races. These are really the most competitive races that we have this November. Obviously, these races are the ones that are going to matter. 46 right now for the Democrats, 48 for the GOP. Currently, the Democrats do have incumbents in Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and New Hampshire, while the Republicans have incumbents in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, although they will not be running the incumbent in Pennsylvania, as Pat Toomey is going to be retiring. So there are 5 incumbents in the 6 most competitive races. 4 of them are Democrats that are going to have to defend their seats this November, and many of them are very vulnerable. However, the odds have increased significantly for the Democrats over the last couple of weeks in many of these very competitive races. If you look at the race in the state of Wisconsin, the Democratic Party's chances have increased pretty significantly just over the last couple of days. If you look at the odds here in Wisconsin, 68 for the GOP, 33 for the Democrats. Just over the last couple of days, Democrats have increased from 26 all the way until 36. So the margin that Ron Johnson has had over the Democrats has decreased by 20% over the last couple of days. And if you look at the race here in Wisconsin, of course, Ron Johnson is going to win his renomination on the Republican side, while on the Democratic side, Mandela Barnes is expected to be the nominee. However, it is a close race between him and Alex Lazary. But if you look at the polling here, Mandela Barnes does lead over Ron Johnson in the latest poll that has been released. And so I do think that is indicative of the fact that Ron Johnson may be very vulnerable this November, and the betting odds do show this. His numbers have decreased just because of this poll over the last couple of days, and a lot of bad press about him and his involvement in trying to overthrow the election of Joe Biden. That is not going to help him in Wisconsin, a state that Joe Biden won in 2020. So the state of Wisconsin, currently I have as lean for the GOP. And moving out west to the state of Nevada. In the state of Nevada, it is not good for the Democrats right now. 62% chance of victory for the GOP, 41 for the Democrats and Catherine Cortez Masto. Catherine Cortez Masto is running for a second term against Adam Laxalt. Adam Laxalt, of course, did lose the gubernatorial election in 2018 to Steve Sisolak, but still, if you look at the betting odds or if you look at the polling here, the numbers are good for Adam Laxalt. The most recent poll really does show a very strange big lead for Catherine Cortez Masto, but that is clearly an outlier. If you look at all the other polls released, Adam Laxalt has a clear advantage over Catherine Cortez Masto. And if you look at the betting odds, he has a clear advantage in this race, 62-41 as of this point in time. This does show, obviously, that Catherine Cortez Masto still has a very good chance of winning. Donald Trump had a much lower than 41% chance at winning the 2016 presidential election, even lower for 2020. So this is still a very close race, but the Republicans do have the clear advantage as of this point in time in the state of Nevada. So I have Nevada as well being a lean state on this map. And the final lean state on this map is the state of New Hampshire in favor of Maggie Hassan and the Democrats. In the state of New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan has a 58% chance at winning her re-election, while the Republican primary is still very much a mess at this point in time. If you look at the latest polling for the Republican primary, it does show Donald Boldeau with a significant lead over the rest of the field. However, Chuck Morse is still more likely to win this nomination. Both individuals, I think, would be very mediocre candidates against Maggie Hassan. Maggie Hassan has led in every single poll against Donald Boldeau, while she did come up short against Chuck Morse in the latest poll release. So the race may be a little bit close, but really, if you look at the betting odds, her numbers have increased significantly over the last couple of months. If you look at just 2 months ago, in late April, Maggie Hassan had a 50% chance of winning, lower than the Republicans. These numbers may go over 50% at some, or may go over 100 when they're added up at some point in time, and that is just because of rounding. So the Democratic Party has the clear advantage going into New Hampshire, and I do think that Maggie Hassan is likely to end up winning her race this November. And now we have the 3 tilt states on this map, the 3 closest races. I'm going to start off with Pennsylvania. This race the Democrats are doing surprisingly well in. John Fetterman against Mehmet Oz, and obviously you guys all know about the latest polls showing a significant lead for John Fetterman over Mehmet Oz. John Fetterman currently is led by significant margins, almost double digits in some of these polls. that have been released over the last couple of days. John Fetterman 50, 44, 48, 44, and 46, 37, and these polls are really all released at basically the same time. So Mehmet Oz is in a lot of trouble, and the betting odds suggest this. The Republican Party at one point in time 3 months ago had a 62% chance of winning. Now they have a 47% chance of winning, and the Democrats are actually favored in this race in Pennsylvania, and this really just goes to show you how much better of a candidate John Fetterman is compared to Mehmet Oz. And so on this map here, I am going to fill in the state of Pennsylvania as being tilted for the Democrats. I think they do have an advantage in this race. This is really the only state that they can realistically flip this election cycle, and I do think Pennsylvania will end up going to John Fetterman, at least as of this point in time. Moving out west again to the state of Arizona, where Mark Kelly is running for his re-election. This race is going to be a little bit closer and a little bit less favorable for the Democrats as of this point in time, at least for Mark Kelly. If you look at the polling in this race, Mark Kelly has done very well in the polls that have been released over the last couple of months against all of the possible Republicans that he may face. It is still a very close primary on the GOP side. Blake Masters does lead in the latest poll. He did recently get the support of Donald Trump, but really we're just going to have to see what happens in the primary here in early August. If you look at the polling, though, Mark Kelly has led in every single poll that has been released, and by significant margins. That likely is because of the low name recognition of the Republicans that he may face, but still, these are very good numbers for the Democratic Party, but the betting odds still do show that the GOP has a 55% chance of winning, 45 for Mark Kelly and the Democrats, although Mark Kelly's numbers have increased over the last couple of weeks here. If you look at his low point, at one point he only had a 36% chance of winning. Now he's all the way up at 45, so this is good for the Democrats, but really we're just gonna have to see what happens in Arizona over the next couple of months. I think that this does clearly show that the state of Arizona is going to be very close, but as of right now, the GOP still does have a slight advantage in this race that the Democrats have to defend if they want to win the Senate again. As with the loss in Arizona here, the GOP does have the lead in terms of the amount of seats, and 51 does give them the majority. Now, finally, in the state of Georgia, a very close race between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. Honestly, a lot closer than I originally thought. Looking at the polling here, it is a very close race. Although Herschel Walker led in many of the polls leading up to the summer, the latest two polls do show Raphael Warnock ahead by 5 points, and the other one showing a tie in the state. But if you look at the betting odds here, 52-50, I mean, this is the closest market. Herschel Walker's numbers have crashed over the last couple of weeks. The Democratic Party chances have increased significantly, and I think that this is mainly because of the fact that we have seen better polling numbers for Raphael Warnock, on top of the fact that Herschel Walker just has too many things that he has not disclosed, and these things are coming out about him, his history with depression as well as abuse, and the fact that, I mean, Herschel Walker just says a lot of nonsensical things a lot of the time on the campaign trail, so the GOP does have a very slight advantage in Georgia, but really this race could go either way, and I do think that Raphael Warnock could take the lead in terms of his odds of winning in the next couple of days. So 52-48, this is the 2022 Senate map based on the betting odds as of this point in time, but really what they tell us is that Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona, these races are going to be very close and really the ones that decide the outcome of the 2022 midterm elections. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below. If you know, to comment down below how you think these betting odds will be, how well you think these betting odds will be in predicting the midterm elections. Subscribe to my channel if you have not, and I will see you guys in the next video.